In this podcast, we're going to cover a topic called set-driven keys, or is known as SDKs. So, what are SDKs? Well, SDKs are taking the time, your time slider, and instead using an attribute, like our translate X here. What if I can imagine as this arrow is heading towards these two doors, you can see my translate X value is increasing and decreasing. What if I replace that so when my arrow is going through these doors, the doors would actually slide open like they were keyframed? You can do this with set-driven keys. You can change the focus point because time is just actually a float value. It looks like it's an integer, but you've probably accidentally put it on like 1.25 or 1.5. It's just a float value here. Matter of fact, I can even do this. I can put like 1.5. You can see it's like halfway in between. So we can refocus this. Let me show you this. Okay, so if I click on edit, you see I have these two great options. One says set-driven key. I need to select at least one attribute to make this highlight up. So set-driven key. I bring this little menu on here. Now, the menu is actually separated into a driver area and a driven area. Now, you probably heard me mention this before on doing constraints. This is kind of where I get it from it. So we have one driver object, which is going to be this arrow. And then we have two driven objects. So I'm going to highlight both of these guys. So look driven. Now, it's not the actual transform or the object we're selecting. It's the attribute. So when I move this forward and back, I say, hey, when this goes closer, when translate X is closer to my doors, I want them to open up. So translate X is the attribute. It's going to be driver. And the attributes going to be driven are going to be translate Z. It's the same thing in both of these. So I'm going to select both the doors. And since they have a common attribute, translate Z, I can have one driver and one or more driven attributes. I can even select multiples here, but I'm only going to select one. Okay, so right now we're in a resting position. The bullet or arrow is sitting here nice and happily. And we say key. And you notice I have one of the doors selected, and I get this reddish orange color on here, which you probably recognize as being a keyframe. Both these have on it. Okay, so if I grab my arrow and now move it through the doors. Now remember what happened if we posed our character and then move the time. Like for instance, if I open this door and then move my arrow forward, you see it snaps. Same thing happens in normal keyframing. So I move my arrow through, so that's my driver attribute. And now I'm going to open my doors. Like that. Okay? And now we see our arrow, translate X is selected for our driver. And we see our driven objects and their attributes selected. And I say key. And watch what happens when I move the arrow back. See how it already is animating? Now I move my arrow through my doors, highlight both my doors and zero it out, close them. And they don't have to be selected because they're selected in the SDK menu. Hit key, and you can say it's even saying result one, just like we're doing our keyframes. See? And they open. Now you say, what happens if I want to change the animation? How do I find, because I don't see any keyframes here. Well, actually the keyframes are right here, but you still don't see them on the time slider. Well, if I go into Windows, Animation, and Graph Editor, the Graph Editor, when I select one of my doors, I hit F, there's our animation. Now the difference here is that you see in the bottom, instead of time, this is the arrow geo translate X. That's the attribute as we're traveling through that's going through. So if I have my arrow halfway in between, and I select both my doors, hit F, I got this. So if I want one of my doors to be a little bit less, well, this door here, if I just move it down, you see how the door gets closer? And this one I can do closer, and you'll see. See, it doesn't open quite as far. So that's interesting. I mean, if you notice, if I move it way down here, it still does the same thing. So what do you use this for? Well, this is a pretty easy example, but if you want to rig like props, like a car, like when you press in the buttons and something else happens, like windshield wipers, really good for like stick shifts and things like that, gears moving. The good side is that you have a really good canned animation that you're moving through. The bad thing is that after that range, it's done. If you need to keep on increasing ones, it's not the best tool for that. But it's awesome if you want to do like a bolt action on a rifle and you want the whole thing to be driving it. You know, that's a great thing. You can do a custom attribute with this that will actually drive that animation. So you can say for 0 to 10, it does to the whole range of loading, or you can have an assault rifle has burst, or you can do 3 bursts when you turn it on, or you can do like 1 burst when you turn it on, and things like that. So SDKs are really, really, really powerful.